Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today I'm going to be doing a book review of We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Now please note that there will be a non-spoiler section as well as a spoiler section. Stay tuned. Before we begin, I just have to say that this is my second attempt at Shirley Jackson, and my first attempt, being The Haunting of Hill House, did not go down so well, surprisingly, because it is such a beloved book. But I'm pleased to say that I absolutely adored We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and it ended up being a 5-star read for me. First of all, I looked up some interesting facts about Shirley Jackson as an author, and I have to say I wish I'd done so before I had embarked on reading the novel, because I found out some very interesting things. First of all, she had a very troubled life. Her marriage was very troubled, where her husband basically had affairs left, right and centre. She also suffered towards the end of her life from severe anxiety and agoraphobia, where she didn't leave her house for 6 months, and she also had a distrust and almost hostility towards the people in the town where she lived because of the way they kind of saw her and her husband. So there were all sorts of strange things at work there, and she had a mental breakdown. She also happened to be a witch, or that's what she wanted people to believe, and there were numerous books on witchcraft in her property, in her home. Now I want you to think about that last point about being a witch when I start talking about one of the characters, because it's very, very interesting, but also just the novel as a whole. Really, you can see kind of the reasons why she wrote this novel. It really digs into her own psyche. So what is the story about? Well, first of all, it is about 2 sisters and uncle living an isolated life in a secluded mansion, the Blackwood Mansion, and it's sort of set up above this village. Now, when I say secluded and isolated, they are hated by the general population of the village, and it's just a very, very interesting dynamic from the beginning. As we can see, we have always lived in a castle, the castle being obviously a symbol of Gothic literature. And even though there's no Dracula living in this castle, these girls and their uncle, I'm going to talk about the characters in a moment, hide themselves away there from the rest of the world, and there's all sorts of things at work here. Now I want to talk for a moment about Shirley Jackson's writing, which is just truly spectacular. And in the first page she weaves a spell around the reader. She draws you in, and it's just pretty powerful. I find myself completely drawn into the character, and the first character that we see, basically the story from her point of view, she's a narrator. I'm going to read the opening paragraph, which is actually quite famous, as it's been said that this is just about the best opening paragraph in any novel ever written. You can make your own mind up about that. My name is Mary Catherine Blackwood. I am 18 years old and I live with my sister, Constance. I have often thought that with any luck at all I could have been born a werewolf, because the 2 middle fingers on both my hands are the same length. But I have had to be content with what I had. I dislike washing myself, and dogs, and noise. I like my sister Constance, and Richard Plantagenet, and Amanita Phallicodius, the death cup mushroom. Everyone else in my family is dead. Now, yeah, this is a truly astounding opening paragraph, but for me, in the rest of the chapter 1, it just gets better from there. We start off by seeing Merricat, as she's known, going to the village to buy supplies, to buy food. and she does this twice a week. And I'm going to go into the other characters just now, but just the way she's described walking through this village, and she has to return library books or collect library books as well. You just get this sense of fear and hatred from the villagers. They distrust her, they don't want anything to do with her, the kids tease her, and it's just so interesting being inside this girl's head. And you kind of forget that she's 18 years old. That's done on purpose. It's almost like she's stuck being 12, we'll get to that in a minute. She behaves like a young child, and her way of dealing with getting through this village is by playing games and making up games to try and make sure she gets to the groceries and gets home as quickly as possible. And yeah, it's just really, really fascinating being inside her head. A lot of people are really mean to her. There's one or two people that are kind of sympathetic to her, but I really loved that first chapter, to the extent where I was drawn into the story immediately. I wanted to know what happened. I wanted to know more about her family, and I wanted to know about who she's staying with, her sister and her uncle. It just drew me in. I just have to say that there's something very wrong about Merricat. You're also sympathetic towards her, but she does seem to be very unstable from the very beginning. Now, for me, that did not make me feel less sympathetic towards her. And in fact, I was sympathetic towards her probably most of the novel, maybe all of the novel. And it takes a real skill for an author to be able to do that, because you learn more things about her. Now she lives in this mansion, this huge house, this estate, with her sister Constance. Now Constance suffers from agoraphobia, and she has not left the house in 6 years. And 6 years ago there was a family tragedy, which I'm going to go into more detail just now. And they live with their uncle, who is bound in a wheelchair and basically is mentally messed up. And the three of them live an existence in this house. And they live a life of routine, where it's about food, which is actually quite important in this novel. It's about cooking, making food, keeping the house clean as it was, keeping the mother's and the father's areas clean, and it's just the three of them in this sprawling mansion. And they are happy in their isolation. They are happy being away from other people. The routine comforts them, and they don't want anything to do with the outside world. Okay, so here we have these three outsiders, these three others, not part of society, and they're carrying on as normal, living their daily routine. And it's quite interesting, one thing that Merricat does. It shows her almost childlessness, her wildness, and also the sense of magic and her way of protecting the family and protecting the house and protecting everyone from outsiders, is that she lays up all sorts of totems. She buries things in the lawn, like silver coins. She nails up a book against a tree, and these are all her ways. And she also speaks these magic words, but she has all these different ways, all these different rituals to protect themselves from the outside world and from invaders. Constance is the person who actually looks after the house. She does the cooking and the cleaning, so she's taken over the role of mother. And the uncle, very interestingly enough, and I'm going to get to this point just now when I go into spoilers, that's a minor spoiler because I'm sure you know, he looks back at the events of the past, of this family tragedy that I've been talking about, and he takes notes. So he's almost our eyes into what happened, and it's very interesting. Now they're carrying on with their lives in this kind of self-imposed isolation. When they get a visitor, there's a cousin who comes knocking at the door, and he wants in, and their lives will never be the same after that. Okay, first of all I'm going to talk about just a minor spoiler. You sort of learn about it quite early on in the book, but the family is murdered. They're poisoned, I think it's by arsenic, yes, in the sugar bowl during dinner one night. And the main culprit, or the main suspect, is Constance, the older sister. And now she was basically reprieved, she was let go. And so that is one of the reasons that the villagers hate the family. But there are other reasons as well. The villagers hate the family because for as long as they can remember, there's this class thing. The family has been rich. The original father of the family was interested in the material wealth aspect and was quite a harsh man. Now, yeah, this is interesting because so it's twofold. One is the fear of the unknown, this unresolved mystery, who did actually poison the family, and they believe Constance is still guilty, even though she was let off. And secondfold is that they've always hated us. And that's exactly what Merricat says at one stage. They've always hated our family because of our wealth and because the villagers are pretty poor themselves. Okay, now we're going to look into a few more spoilers. So if you haven't read the novel and you intend to, perhaps it's best to shut down now. First, let's just look at the characters in a little bit more detail. Basically, Merricat is at the center of this novel. You see the world through her eyes, and you see increasingly how unstable she is. She lives in a fantasy world, and as the novel moves forward, it's almost like you start to see how a little bit more psychotic and violent she is. But the skill of the writing almost made me feel like still sympathetic towards her and on her side. And to the point when this cousin comes along and intrudes on their lives, intrudes on their isolation, and intrudes on basically their routine and tries to change things up. And it's interesting because he's male and he's only interested there for the money. It really riles up Merricat, who wants to get rid of him by any means possible. And she becomes increasingly unstable and violent, and eventually you just know something's going to happen. And when she sets fire to the house and everything burns down in the villages and everything just goes to chaos, really it's kind of quite terrifying, quite hectic what happens. But yeah, she's such an interesting character. She's just so so well written. And the fact that I felt sympathy for her and I felt for her, the fact that she is very possibly kind of psychotic or sort of a sociopath, and the only person she cares about is her sister. She doesn't care about anyone else, and she only tolerates the uncle. It's often in the book she says, I think I should be a little bit nicer to him. I think I should be acting a little bit better towards my uncle. And we know that she basically poisoned the family. It was not Constance. And she feels nothing. She feels no regret. It's like she's in her own little world, her own little space. She loves the isolation, she loves the routine, she loves being completely separate from the world. And she wants to protect her sister, or she wants to make sure that her sister is not going to give up and go out into the world, which is what the cousin is trying to get her to do, to marry her, to say, come on, you need to step back into the world. Merricat will have none of it. She wants her sister for herself, and she wants the two of them to live happily in isolation. Okay, another interesting talking point about this particular novel for me was why exactly did Merricat poison the family? It's never really known, not explicitly anyway, but we do know Merricat when she was younger. This happened when she was 12. She was a naughty child, and the father used to scold her and send her to bed without supper, and that is the night that this happened. There's other things that I think might have led her towards this. And remember that this was written in 1961. I think it was 1961 or 1962, where it was very much a patriarchal society, where men ruled the roost, and there might have been a sense of abuse or neglect from the father. Yeah, and Merricat perhaps abuse towards the older sister at the time. I don't know if it was anything sexual. No one's ever said that. But there might have been a reason that actually drove her over the edge. Now, she didn't poison her sister because the arsenic she put in the sugar bowl, and she knew that her sister didn't have sugar on the strawberries. I think it was strawberries at that time. And the uncle only had a tiny bit, would put him in a wheelchair, messed up his mind, but the rest of the family died. So yeah, I think it had something to do. But if you think about Shirley Jackson and her background, that she's saying something about the patriarchal society and that women were powerless. And this was her way of giving one of her characters power, sort of feminine power. And in a way they took control of the household, which was originally run by men. So now what you have is these two sisters in this house living alone, happily living alone, but they've taken control over things, which doesn't happen in society at the time. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about what happens when the cousin Charles arrives at their door. And once again, he's a male figure. And I think this is important. I haven't heard this mentioned very often, but in a way this is quite a feminist book. Very strong female characters, even if they're mentally unstable, mentally sick. But this cousin Charles is a gold digger, and he comes in and he basically wants to throw their lives, even though they're happy and they're living in isolation in their castle, which is their retreat, but also their prison. He wants to come and basically upend the cart. And Constance, because of her nature, is more than willing to kind of listen to him, take him in, and he's basically using her. He wants to marry her and he wants the money, and as I said, Merricat can see through all of that, and she does everything in her power, first of all by trying to use her sort of magical realism, magic stuff to try and get him to go away, speaking magic words. She really does live in this fantasy, really kind of disturbing, eerie, unsettling kind of world that's completely separate from reality. And when it doesn't work, when she asks him to leave, her methods get increasingly more violent until, yeah, she sets the house on fire, and I've mentioned that already. And now the book basically ends when, first of all the villagers come, the fire department comes, and the villagers become almost like this mob. They're basically chanting, just let the fire burn this damn house down. Let the fire keep burning it. And then some of them start throwing bricks into the windows. The rest of the villagers becomes a mob, and it becomes violent and chaotic. And they trash the place. They go in there and break everything. And of course, Merricat and Constance, they run away and they hide in Merricat's safe little place. Together with the black cat that Merricat owns. I forgot about that. It also adds to the whole witchiness. And they wait till everything is gone, and then they go back into their castle, into their sanctuary. And as messed up as it is, they board themselves up and they hide themselves off from the rest of the world once again. And they are safe in their isolation. And so what Merricat actually does is she prevents the sister from going out into the world. She has her way. A lot of people say that that's a very villainous thing, that she is the villain. And perhaps she is. But the two sisters are happy, once again, in their isolation, boarded out from the rest of the world, who eventually start bringing them food, the villagers, because they feel guilty about what they've done. And that's very interesting. So now they are being fed. They're not cooking like the normal thing about a woman in the kitchen. They are being fed by the villagers who start food, and there's almost this whole thing that becomes, they start being revered, almost idolized, and they're happy in their tiny little space outside the world. Paranoia. Okay, that brings me to my final thoughts about this particular novel. I found it a very personal novel, and very interesting on a personal level, because yeah, in a way my wife and I have also run away from the city. We like our lives right now as hermits. We do not like people at our gate. We do not like the outside world, obviously with the exception of family and a few friends. That's a sense of like, the rest of the world must just go away and leave us alone and let us live in peace. And I think this would have been also a very, very interesting novel to read during COVID, during lockdowns. Because yeah, it's just that sense of fear of other people, which is very, very main thing in this book. Okay everyone, so that was my review of We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Have you read this novel? Did you enjoy it? And yeah, please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. And take care of yourselves. See you guys next time. Keep those pages turning, and cheers.